All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the very first installment of Humans of Herpetoculture, the new web series where I, Lucas, take a deep dive with keepers who have far more knowledge and experience than I do in the world of herps. Today, we're extremely fortunate. We have with us a heavy hitter in the world of reptiles. He's one of the authors of The Complete Carpet Python. He keeps the largest, most genetically diverse collection of carpet pythons in the United States as the man behind the moniker Inland Reptile. And until very recently, he had never been bitten by an adult Bredl's python, but I helped change that. So, Mr. Nick Mutton, good to see you, my friend. Thank you so much for joining me today and being my very first guest.
Glad to be here.
Right on. So, loving the virtual background.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about that guy?
That is a Cape York Iron Range, in particular, Iron Range National Park scrub python that I found on one of my trips to Australia with some Australian and American friends I drug along with me. That's the in situ shot before we touched it or anything, sitting on the ground with some wet leaf litter. We're up there looking for green tree pythons and whatever else we could find, and found this guy as well.
Beautiful snake. Was that on your last trip?
Yeah, I was supposed to go again this year, but current world events being what they are, the government decided I wasn't destined to go up there this year.
Yeah, not a whole lot of good things happening.
We're supposed to go to Mitchell River Plateau, look for rough-scale pythons, then drive down to Exmouth and dive with whale sharks. So
wow,
basically the most awesome trip of all time. It happened. Got the airfare funded and everything, but hope to do it again. Hope to do it for real in 2021.
Absolutely. Yeah, it seemed like 2020 was supposed to be a big year for everybody. Everybody just got knocked off the hill.
Complete garbage year. Oh, just one insult after another.
Yeah. Well, more time to tend to the snakes at home then.
Man, I'm sick of tending to snakes. I gotta tell you, I look back fondly at being a hobbyist when you were excited to get something new and everything was exciting, and now it's like, man, I get excited to see them leave. I literally just got back from the airport, 5 boxes, 9 less snakes to clean this week. Oh, it's glorious.
Yeah, that's
my greatest joy now is when I sell enough babies and I can actually turn off one rack and just keep fishing for the year and just power it down because I consolidate. Oh, it's great.
That's one of the questions that I had for you today. A lot of us are hobbyists. We keep reptiles on the side. You're one of the few that does it full time. And my question with that is, has it killed any of the passion for you? You hear the cliche pretty often, the people that make their passion, their hobby, their career, maybe it gets soured for them a little bit. I wonder what your experience has been in that regard.
I would not say it's soured, but it is different. It is at some point when it's purely for the enjoyment of it, there's kind of a purity there, I guess. And when it becomes like a business and it becomes your sole source of income and you need to pass a certain threshold in terms of revenue or whatever to keep your bills paid and keep doing what you love, it does put added pressure on things. It was funner going to the reptile shows, being on the other side of the table than it has become. It has become kind of sort of my job, and I have a good time doing those things still, but it does take a little bit of the shine off of it. But I will definitely tell you that without any reservation, that the worst day working for myself, breeding snakes for a living, is better than the best day of working for somebody else. I hate to say that I'm lucky or fortunate, because those sorts of connotations imply that, I don't know, that I just fell into this line of work and fell off the back of the turnip truck and landed in this job. And it's not like that. I'm where I'm at because I may put myself where I'm at, but so it's not, there's no luck really involved. I didn't do anything anybody else couldn't do or still couldn't do.
Certainly.
But I do what I love to do for a living, and that is very rare that you get to do that. And so I'm pretty happy. I'd say I can't complain, but we all complain. I totally do. Before I complain about stuff all the time.
Nothing's perfect, right?
I probably shouldn't complain as much as I do, because ultimately I get to play with snakes for a living and chase them in the wild and do cool things like that. So it's been good.
Certainly. Yeah. And how has the state of the world as it is now, how has COVID affected being a full-time snake breeder, if it has at all?
It has made almost no difference at all. What you'll find whenever there's like civil unrest or any sort of disruption in the regular flow of life economically or whatever, the pet industry is remarkably resilient. It's almost like if you're stuck in your house. For a while, when they started all this lockdown shenanigans, business went up, I think, because a lot of people are like, oh, everybody's working from home. And instead of actually doing their job, they're farting around on the internet looking at snakes to buy. It actually got better for a minute there. And even since, it's about the same as it always is year to year. It's not, it's no worse. There was about a month there where it was really hard to get paper towels, which was difficult. I mean, I cannot even describe to you the amount of paper towels I use. Like, it is to clean my baby room. I keep all the babies on disposable paper towels that I chop the end off in a chop saw, so they're like a perfect liner. So they're disposable water bowl, disposable floor. Every week gets a new floor and a new water bowl. Just boom. It's the fastest way to do things and the most sanitary and efficient. But I'll probably go through 7 rolls of paper towels a week just in my baby room. It's crazy. So when everybody started hoarding toilet paper and paper towels, which never made a lick of sense anyway, but they got a little hard to find stuff. But beyond that, fine.
Totally. I still have trouble with the paper products here in the Bay Area. It's really pretty empty on the shelves. Yeah.
Craziest, most nonsensical thing. Sometimes I think this country has lost their damn minds. It's like, why is it, of all the things to hoard, toilet
it's not going to help you against the virus.
For a virus that doesn't cause diarrhea, like that seems like a weird priority. You know, food makes sense, maybe, I guess, or something, or necessities. But toilet paper, you could literally, throughout most of our evolutionary history, toilet paper wasn't even a thing until 100 years ago. We got along all right without it.
We all have the garden hose in an emergency, right?
Yeah, like it's toilet paper emergency. I don't understand people's reasoning sometimes.
Totally.
That was a weird tangent.
Yeah, and honestly, though, there probably will be a few. Yeah. I love talking to you because our phone calls are always at least an hour. I think last time we talked only about Star Wars for an hour on a call about carpets. So
it's the important stuff.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that there is not a better moment to put this baby behind me.
There you go. Well, yeah.
In this household, we worship Watto.
That is not the best of the movies, I'd have to say.
No.
It's like got about 15 really awesome minutes in it.
And we'll get to some Star Wars in the rapid fire, but back to the reptiles. So I feel like you have kind of become my mentor in the world of herpetoculture. I'm extremely grateful for that. I don't take that for granted. And I was wondering, did somebody fill that role for you when you were just getting started? Did you have somebody that kind of was available to you when you had questions and maybe showed you the ropes, that maybe that's why you're more willing to do that for others? And maybe just speak to the importance of mentorship in the hobby. What do you think about that?
Actually, my own personal story is quite the opposite. No mentors, not even anything vaguely resembling a mentor. I live in Eastern Washington State, and that is not exactly a hotbed of herpetocultural activity. There's always a local herp scene, but there's really, when I was coming up in the hobby in the early to mid 90s, there really wasn't a lot of guys around doing anything of much consequence. So I never really had that mentor situation, which would have been really beneficial probably. But so for me, in my formative years in the hobby, it was all about books. And so those books filled that role for me. There are a few key books that I can absolutely say would not be here doing what I'm doing now if it wasn't for a few of these books. And those are Ross and Marchek's Reproductive Husbandry of Bows and Pythons, PPI's Pythons of the World, Volume 1, Australia, and anything Philippe de Vaugelet ever wrote. those books really are what stoked my imagination and my curiosity and made me want to learn more and pursue this at a deeper level. So
that's fantastic.
Which is why that's a big part of why it's important to me to write books and to do that, to pay that forward, because that was such a huge influence on me.
Right.
And somebody needs to keep that tradition up. There's a long tradition of that in herpetoculture, and somebody needs to keep doing that stuff for the next generation. So I've taken up the mantle, I guess.
Absolutely. And perfect segue. You did write the book. You wrote The Complete Carpet Python, which is an amazing piece of literature that I've read cover to cover multiple times. And at the moment, you are working on the second edition. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Well, that's exciting.
It's amazing how long these things take. Because you got to go in fits and starts. Because, I mean, I've got 1,000 snakes and kids and all the rest of it. I'm working on some academic papers dealing with pythons as well. And you're kind of pulled in a lot of different directions time-wise. So you don't always have as much time to work on that kind of thing as you'd like. And Justin is the same way. He's got a bunch of kids and a full-time job at the university. And, so it's hard to find the time sometimes to work on it. And I was sending him some files. It was the final version of the Brettles Python chapter for the second edition, the Revive with all the revisions. And and I realized the date, we've been working on this for 15 months on the second edition. It's just, it's a lot of work. It's not, I guess the easy thing to do in these situations would be to just dust off the same manuscript, throw in some new pictures, a few new little bits and bobs, and then put it out. But that's really, I don't want to do that.
Right.
At this point, the books and things like that and papers and articles, and I kind of look at that as kind of a legacy issue. And so I want to just absolutely hit it as far out of the park as we possibly can. So that involves going even deeper.
Yeah. And this stuff is ever changing, right? I mean, you probably have a big pool of new content to draw from, even in these years since the first book.
There is 6 or 7 papers that are published in the years between editions that their findings are relevant and need to be incorporated, as well as original research that we have done and are engaged in to that end for the book as well. So it will be a different book. It will look like a different book. It'll be not just all the pictures will be different, but it will not. It's a new book, basically. It's not just a polished up version of the original book. It will be substantially improved and substantially larger. I got permission from our publisher to go up to 500 pages this time, which is just massive. That's just huge. Because Vin Russo wrote a book, The Complete Boa Constrictor, in the same series, and it's a pretty good book. So I got Vin's book because at the time his book came out first, and that was considered the best book in the series to that point. So I bought it. I'm not really into boa constrictors, but I've done Vin for a long time. And so I read his book cover to cover. It was all right, I want to set a high standard. If this is the best book in the series, I'm going to go start there and work my way up. And then Vin just put out the second edition of his book, and it's 50 pages longer than our book. It's way bigger. It's thick. And I'm let me go, crap, now I got to go one past that. Now I got to go to 500 pages. It's 440 or something, 500. Just make this.
That's awesome.
Yeah. We got permission to go to 500 pages. I'm going to use every one of them.
You mentioned incorporating some new relevant academic papers into the new book. Can you tell us anything about what those papers pertain to, or is that down low for now?
General Python phylogenetics papers, that investigate the relationships between different taxa. Sometimes you really never find a paper that's dedicated to just teasing apart the relationships between carpet pythons.
Right.
It's almost always a larger thing. They're looking at this part of this python irradiation or that, and there's a few samples here and there, but you can get some useful information out of that. And so some of these things, we're not talking about large papers with large sample sizes, but there's some good stuff out there. The biggest revelations and everything were a paper that just came out this year. And they're not really necessarily pertinent to carpet pythons per se, but more the relationship of carpet pythons to all other pythons and how all that fits together at the higher levels and stuff. And that is the realization that because you have a few things that are kind of like oddball things. You have like Oenpelli pythons and rough-scale pythons, which are kind of oddball species. Where do they belong? They're really not like anything. The rough-scale pythons, one paper showed that they were sister species to the green tree python clade. Another paper, though they examined this smaller, with a smaller sample size, showed that they were slightly closer to carpet python. So they seem about in the middle. And it turns out there's good reason for that. They are equidistant from the green python clade and the carpet python clade. Basically, the lineage that leads to the modern Morelia, as we know it, which is totally paraphyletic. Why the green pythons are in Morelia is beyond me. They shouldn't be. They should be in a resurrected chondropython because they do not belong with the carpet python group at all. But
right
here we are. So what you find is that the lineage that ultimately gives rise to carpet pythons, the earliest branch off that lineage is the Oenpelli python. They are a very, very, very early offshoot from that. They are the most basal member of the Morelia clade. They've been given their own genus that is a bit, they got a little creative with that one, but because they were already given a monotypic genus 30 years ago. And so there's kind of an issue with who gets to name stuff and the rules as far as that goes. But not to get bogged down in that procedural stuff, they are the earliest offshoot of the Morelia clade. And then about 15 minutes after they diverged, the rough-scale python lineage diverged. So the rough scales and the Oenpelli pythons are both very, very early offshoots of that lineage. They diverged from that lineage before the split between the green python clade and the carpet python clade.
Wow.
So Oenpelli splits off, then rough scale split off very shortly thereafter, and then it goes for a while, for several million years, and then you have another split, another fork in the road with one branch leading to the green python clade, which is at least 4 species now, and probably more, and the carpet python. So they are allied with that. So to that end, we have elected to include Oenpelli pythons in the new book. So we are finishing up a chapter on that.
That's fascinating. That's very interesting. So the phylogenetic data that you are working with for this book, it really, it has implications for what the taxonomic arrangement should be this time around. Yes.
I can say without saying too much, it's very easy to get out over your skis with this sort of thing. There are a few papers that tangentially touch on this that hint at a certain sort of relationship between the various carpet pythons. That's not what we currently have. But we're pursuing our own data and our own molecular testing and everything just for the book. If all goes according to plan, we should have that, and thus
right.
We won't rely wholly on other people's data. We'll have, and if our data agrees with their data, then
and you're working with a geneticist on that, right?
Yeah. Dr. Warren Booth is
Warren Booth.
Right. So I managed to talk him into it. So.
That's going to be really cool to see.
Yeah, it'll be but that's a whole. I think that's further than anybody's ever gone for a reptile book.
I think that's safe to say.
Have molecular testing and sequence data run just for a reptile book.
Have you gotten any of those results back yet, or is that ongoing?
Only a few preliminary ones, but they're. Last year I gave a talk at the Herpetoculture Symposium and went over some preliminary results, but that's really only from sequencing a few genes. what we're looking at doing now is hopefully full mitochondrial genome sequencing, so the entirety of the mitochondrial genomes of all of them, and a pretty good sampling of nuclear genes as well. And when you get that broad sampling, you get a pretty good idea where things stand. I can say that based on our preliminary data and recent works, that the taxonomic arrangement of carpet pythons vis-a-vis species, subspecies will be different. This time around. It will not be the same. So you oftentimes get contradictory papers. One paper will come out and say one thing, another paper will say you look at different genes, draw a completely different result, and you have a little bit of that. Some older works show the relative level of distinction for inland carpets being much higher than more recent ones. And so that is one that needs to be sorted out. There's also a few forms that are kind of enigmas, like the Flinders and Gammon Ranges carpets in that area. Earlier work showed them more closely allied with imbricata, but there was some evidence of some introgression of genes from Metcalfi into them. So what are those? It's like figuring out where those belong and where the breakpoints are exactly between these things, because there are multiple genetic distinctions in different zones just within what we call coastal carpets. They're not all the same. Does that rise to the level of being granted its own taxonomic designation? Maybe, maybe not. But not all coastal carpets are the same thing. Jungle carpets probably aren't a thing at all. It's not the breakpoints at the molecular level are not where people think they are. Because ultimately, things like color and pattern are very poor indicators of relationships, and the color and pattern is so easily influenced by local conditions, and that happens very rapidly. Just look at my own captive breeding history. In 9 generations, I turned bright yellow jungle carpets into bright white jungle carpets just because I thought it'd be cool to make white jungle carpets. And it took 9 generations, but they're parchment white now. And that's just one guy slowly, generation by generation, selectively breeding, in a snake room, and, give nature the proper stimulus in a couple thousand years. And it's not, basically there's a disconnect between genotype and phenotype. Were you to genetically test my ivory jungles and their bright yellow forebears, you'd find no appreciable distinction whatsoever.
Right.
But they look very different. So people tend to couple those things a little more closely than they should. If something looks different, it must be different. Sometimes that's the case. Sometimes it's not. If you, getting off on a tangent talking about water pythons, but if you were to look at genetically, you have 3 populations of water pythons. You have them in New Guinea, you have them in Queensland, and you have them in Northern Territory. And those populations aren't interbreeding. They all look the same. The Queensland ones, the New Guinea ones are the same genetically, because 6,000 years ago, you could have walked there without getting your feet wet. They haven't been separated long enough to develop a separate identity genetically. The ones in Northern Territory are vastly different genetically, but look the same. They look pretty much the same. I have them all. I have all 3. They look the same, but they are arguably distinct enough to be a full species. One paper looked at them showed that the ones in Northern Territory are more closely related to a Macklot's python than they are the water pythons in Queensland. They look just like the ones in Queensland. They don't look anything like a Macklot's python. So that, phenotype, genetic drift happens, genes change at a fairly predictable rate when things are isolated. Phenotype only changes if the right stimulus is there, if it needs to change. If the color and pattern or scalation or whatever is doing the job just fine, there's really no reason, there's no selective pressure for that to change, it won't change. This is why, crocodiles look the same as they did 200 million years ago.
Right.
Pretty much look like crocodiles. It's, same with sharks. Some things have achieved a level of evolutionary perfection and don't really need to change.
Right. Yeah. If it works and you don't die out.
Well, you can, if you look at, and this is, again, a weird tangent to get on, but these are the things that make me interested in this stuff anymore still.
Bring it on.
It's not just getting snakes to breed in a plastic box. That's pretty easy. anybody can do that at this point, but it's kind of pondering these deeper sort of mysteries. You can kind of, all pythons in Australia are like, you have like, pythons showed up in Australia about 25 million years ago from Asia. They weren't native to Australia. They didn't evolve in Australia. They colonized from the north. When the Australian plate drifted far enough north and collided with the Pacific plate, and it started subducting under it, they were able to make the jump. Along with monitor lizards, burandins are not native to Australia. They arrived at the same time. A lot of stuff, agamid lizards, everything showed up around the same time. And you can sort of reconstruct what that original ancestral python looked like by looking at common traits that, if you look at the DNA of all Australian pythons, it all diverges at about 25 million years ago, meaning you have one thing, it shows up, and then all of a sudden, instead of being on a rainforest-covered island or what have you, you have like a continental environment with rainforests and temperate zones and deserts and semi-arid areas, all these. So they radiated in this explosion of diversity as pythons radiated out, colonized, and adapted to all these different ecosystems within Australia. But you'll see commonality with all of these in certain areas with many of these species. The only real way to explain that is that they inherited those things from a common ancestor. If you look at look at prehensile tails. Right. All the carby python group has prehensile tails. Oenpelli pythons, which don't even live in trees mostly. Rough scale pythons, prehensile tails. All the Cymalian clade all have prehensile tails. And what's more likely, that all of those lineages independently evolved a prehensile tail, which is a complicated little bit of machinery? No, it's far more likely that they all inherited it, retained that characteristic from their common ancestor, and that subsequently other lineages have lost it as they adapted to be more terrestrial. It became a liability, having a long articulated tail if you're not using it. So you lose those things. So you can fairly speculate that the last common ancestor would have had a prehensile tail. Look at almost every Australian python, and you'll see that double neck stripe that carpet pythons have. That double neck stripe with a skull and crossbones. Look at a Cape York spotted python, diverged 25 million years ago with a carpet. And that Brettles python, all of them, they'll have that double neck stripe. If they're present in multiple lineages that all diverge at the same time, it's probably because that last common ancestor had that. If you look at I would speculate that the last common ancestor of that first initial python that colonized Australia was probably very similar to a carpet python, in that it was probably 6 or 7 feet long, semi-arboreal, prehensile-tailed snake with a double neck stripe and red babies. Because you see, most Cymalia, they diverged at that same time from the carpet lineage, red babies. Many of the carpets, red babies. Green tree pythons, red babies.
Bolini, right, as well?
What?
Bolin's pythons?
Red babies. Yeah. But they're in the slide. They're just a scrub python, a montane scrub python. So I know the Bolin's python people want to make it seem like there's some special enigma. They are a high elevation scrub python. They're very well nested within that group.
Gotcha.
So if you see these same things, you can kind of run the clock back and fairly speculate what that initial animal looked like. If you look at the closest thing to an Australian python that's not an Australian python is a retic. Retics are basically part of the Australopian python radiation that never quite made it across the Wallace Line into Australia. But what are they? A semi-arboreal prehensile-tailed snake. I mean, it's like if you were to hold a 6-foot retic in your hands and a 6-foot carpet python and someone blindfolded you, you'd be hard-pressed. The only way you'd probably be able to tell the difference is that one would be biting you, probably. And that would be in that they do a very similar job. They are, in lifestyle. That's the closest ancestor, or not ancestor, but the closest relative that isn't east of the Wallace Line. So,
right. Yeah. And do you know off the top of your head approximately how far back we're talking about that these ancestors split off before coming to the Australian Indo area?
It gets a bit murky with like the retics and that stuff. Like you've got two pythons likely evolved in what's now Southeast Asia, though it wouldn't have been exactly the Southeast Asia we know, and it wouldn't have been in the place we know it to be, because they're a pretty old lineage.
Right.
And then almost immediately after that, you have big fork in the road, in which case that initial python lineage diverges into two radiations. One stays in Asia and radiates south into Africa, and that becomes the Afro-Asian python radiation. All your short-tail pythons, Burmese pythons, all your Angolans, balls, your two rock pythons, becomes all of that stuff. And the others radiate eastward through what later becomes known as Indonesia, New Guinea, and south into Australia. And that is the Australopian python radiation. And that divergence between those two radiations is old and deep. This is why when people hybridize, make these extreme hybrid pythons.
No.
yeah, that's a whole nother topic I didn't want to freaking touch. But they don't understand, like, why does their carpet ball python, why are they duds and they can't breed, really? It's because those two lineages split like 45 million years in the past.
Right.
There is this massive gulf of evolutionary time that separates them. It's amazing. The only reason they have heteromorphic sex chromosomes is the only reason they can interbreed at all. But that infertility should be a huge shock given this. Pythons are... I think it's almost like unconsciously we think of everything in terms of like our own species and realize that we fail to realize that these pythons, this is a truly ancient lineage. It's vastly older than primates, much less hominids. It is very old, and the divergences are very, very, very deep. And so, which is why you can pretty much hybridize any two Australian pythons, and you can probably get fertile babies if bred back to one of the parent species. But if you breed a ball python to a carpet python or a ball python to a woma, it's a no-go. Thank God.
Right. Yeah, I think I've heard you say that even just bredli and other and the Spilota clade are something like 14 million years removed from each other?
Yeah, will get revised slightly because the newest paper that came out kind of revised the dates of those splits a bit, but not much, plus or minus a few million years. I've got it all. That's already written, but I'm getting old and can't recall it right off the top of my head.
Point being, though, we're talking about large chunks of geologic history.
Bredl's pythons and the rest of the carpet pythons diverge from the other carpet pythons long before humans diverged from chimpanzees. Like, they're that far back. They don't, we are 6.5 million years away from being, sharing a common ancestor with chimpanzees, and they're, probably double that as far back as they're split with the other carpet pythons.
Right.
This tendency to look at them, oh, that's just a carpet python. It's like, it's not. It truly is not. I mean, they just happened upon a body plan and a lifestyle that works and doesn't need to change. So you get small tweaks, but that's really it. That's why you have these massive genetic differences, but really still kind of looks like a carpet python, doesn't it?
Right.
Imbricata is the same way. They're just as distinct as bredli are from the other carpets. They're super old offshoot of that lineage, but they are obviously a carpet python.
Right.
They're genetically more distinct than you would expect.
With the data that you've analyzed, where are inlands sitting in that discussion?
That's one that I don't want to speculate too much on because our own data, we've only got a few genes. So I want to wait for the rest of it to draw a more firm conclusion. Initial data in previous papers showed them to be very, very, very significantly different. Up to 4.9% sequence divergent from the other carpets, which should be its own species at that point. Later stuff and our own preliminary results show a much more close association with southern form coastal carpets and inland carpets. But we don't have enough of it run to really, I don't want to go off half-cocked based on a couple of genes. I want to really be thorough and then really put that one to rest.
It's very interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
They are very distinct. Anybody that's ever worked with them will tell you that. They are not a coastal carpet. They are definitely their own thing. They're sexually sized dimorphic in the opposite way of the rest of the carpets. Their mating system is different. Their breeding system strategy is different. Their head shape is different. Their body structure and cross section is different. They're a different snake. But it's, do they get their own name or not? That's the
right. Which is all the threshold of percentage difference that warrants that is something that some guy somewhere decided. Right.
It's completely made up.
So
taxonomy is more art than science. It is there. When you get into it, their rules are almost non-existent. It is whatever the person writing that paper feels like.
Right.
You would think that there would be like a universal accepted standard for deviation in whatever meritistic characteristic. There is not. There is not. It is literally, the rules are archaic and have never been updated and desperately need that, which is why you have people like Raymond Hoser, who's so able to manipulate the system, and because the rules are over 200 years old. The rules, it literally, it's just, get into it's called the ICZN, the International Commission for Zoological Nomenclature, and it's just ridiculous. It's like you have to just write up a description that says how you can tell your new species apart from related species, and then you need to publish it and distribute like 100 copies within 100 miles of your house, because 200 years ago that was sufficient. It's not. That's not an acceptable standard today, but they've never revised it, and they don't seem interested in revising it. And this allows people to, like Ray Hoser, and there's other people who do this too, where they'll write some made up thing up, write some nonsense and then publish it in their own journal that they are the only reviewer and the only author, and it technically meets the standard because the standard is absurd. And it allows that. So that's why the system gets abused.
I see. Very interesting. Well, it's going to be, very intriguing to see what the data ends up suggesting after you get the full gene sequence back. So
it's slow going, but we're plugging away.
Yeah,
we're grinding away at it.
Well, so in addition to all the phylogenetic work and the academic papers that you're working in, the second edition will probably also have an expanded morph section as well, right?
yeah, that's putting it mildly. I'm of two minds on the morph section, because to me it's like the least interesting section.
Right.
I just don't care, honestly, at this point. Like, I have every morph of everything that you can possibly have, I have. But it's not really what drives me or really interests me personally. It's an interesting sort of thing to play around with, but it's had a real negative effect on the hobby, in that people have convinced themselves that morphs are the only thing that matter. Right. And if it's not a morph or some sort of mutant or combination of mutant genes, then why bother with it? And in a sense, people have largely lost the appreciation for the animals themselves. They just appreciate morphs. And if you look at like the ball python, everybody beats up on the ball python people, but they have it coming, honestly. Yeah. Like, you have the largest sector of the python market and the largest sector of the reptile market is ball pythons. It has been for 20 years, and it's not going to stop anytime soon. But you have all these people that only care about one aspect. All they care about is morphs. How many broken genes can I cram into this snake? That's the only thing that matters at all. The most worthless snake you could possibly ever hatch is a normal ball python. You couldn't give one away. They don't want them. They literally, this is how little they appreciate what a ball python is supposed to look like. They are routinely behind closed doors sold off as cobra food. Yeah. And as feeder snakes, because they're less than worthless. They're not even willing to put a mouse in them, because that seems like a profoundly unhealthy attitude to me. It's like, if you have no appreciation at all, like, absolutely, and they don't. And I don't want to see the carpet python sector become that. I don't think that's likely.
It's fascinating to me too, how people come into the hobby looking for their first snake, just completely new folks. And even those people are somehow, somewhere along the way, conditioned to think that I need a cool morph. I used to work at the East Bay Vivarium, and I'd have people come in that were looking for their first pet snake. You know, these are people that should be coming in with no preconceived notions of I want a pastel, you know, and it was just so interesting that I would take out maybe a normal Kenyan sand boa or a normal ball and start talking to these folks. And they're like, where's the albinos? So I'm with you there. I agree that it's not a great thing.
There's nothing wrong with morphs, but if you're so blinded by that single-minded pursuit that you're oblivious to everything else, you're really missing out on a lot of stuff. And it's a pretty profoundly negative consequence for the hobby that a lot of people just are blindly unaware of. And that is, there are entire species of python that we are on the cusp of losing in the hobby that we'll never get back. And the only reason we're losing them is because people aren't breeding them because they're too busy breeding morphs to be bothered. We've already lost one. We used to be able to get South African rock pythons, Python natalensis. They were here. They got bred here a few times. They are completely extinct in the hobby. There are none in captivity. There is no breeding going on. You couldn't, and you will never, because of the LASIK listing, you will never be, no one in the United States will ever have the chance to work with a nasty-ass South African rock python. Granted, they don't have a lot of redeeming qualities there, but I mean, it's a damn shame and kind of an indictment of the hobby that they are gone and lost forever. And the only reason they're lost is because the big snake people couldn't be bothered to breed the ones that were here because they were too busy chasing after Burm and retic morphs.
Right.
That's the truth. It's gone and it's never coming back, never to be seen again, because morphs. Because that was what everybody was, that was what was valuable, and no one wanted to bother. And we are precariously close to losing several other species. I swear, if it wasn't for Tom Kyogen in Florida, we would have already lost ring pythons because for about 15 years, the one dude's the only guy breeding them. They're super rare now, and they used to be really commonly available and fairly inexpensive. Now, good luck getting one. You'd get $1,000 for a Sabu python now. It used to be $60 because there were so many of them. They're never going to get imported again because they can't, because Indonesia won't allow the export of them. If we ask this off and then we lose them, we don't ever get those back.
Right.
And the sad thing with that is, the only thing keeping them in the hobby at all now is the freaking exanthic ones, the silver Sabus. People are trying to breed those because it's a morph. It's like, that's just, we're going to lose those things. We had Northern Territory water pythons. We lost them. I brought some over from Europe and brought them back. We had Dunn's pythons in the United States, and we basically lost them in that they basically died out. There were a handful of 30-year-old wild-caught geriatric snakes left. Working with my buddy Ryan Young on resurrecting those. I had to bring a group of them over from Europe, and he got a couple of these really ancient ones to actually breed to try to reestablish a species that should have never been like this.
Right.
But why? Because when those Dunn's pythons first became available and got bred, that initial time, it was 1998, 1999, right as the ball python morph thing was taken off. And then all the emphasis and all the effort and all the cage space and all the money and all the interest shifted from establishing and breeding rare species to breeding, new designer variants of super easy species. And we find ourselves in this situation as a result. So while it might seem slightly hypocritical, I suppose, that I have every carpet morph that you can possibly have, except one, because I can't get that one, and be a bit down on it. I just want people to not lose an appreciation for the natural forms. You can enjoy both and not be so blinded by the morphs, all morphs all the time thing, that you lose sight of the natural inherent beauty of these forms in the wild and as they were supposed to be. You can have both. You can have an albino Darwin and also enjoy wild type Darwins. I have a bunch of both.
Right.
It doesn't have to be all or nothing. And it just seems like and you see the consequence. Look at the retic market. It's almost entirely hybrid morph retics that are all mudded out. And multi-species hybrids, because retics are about a dozen different species of snakes, both described and undescribed, whether they want to acknowledge that or not. And all you can get are a bunch of, it's really hard to find a pure Python reticulatus or Maleo Python reticulatus.
Yeah.
It's pretty damn difficult to find one that's a pure reticulatus because they're all mixed up now.
Right.
And we'll never get any new ones because what we have is all we're ever going to have. You'd think that the knowledge that the gene pool you have is all that there will ever be would maybe force some people to reconsider what they were doing and try to preserve these rare island forms, this kind of stuff. But with the exception of a couple of guys, it clearly hasn't. They're full steam ahead, mix it all up, morph it all out, who cares? And that's objectively not good.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if you took somebody that didn't know a thing about herpetoculture or snakes in captivity, and you covered up the price tags and you put a wild type and a morph next to each other, I guarantee you a lot of people would say they're both pretty, they're both beautiful. Maybe people would favor the wild type, but when you get that commercial value, devaluing what nature created in favor of, as you say, our broken gene creations, I feel like that's the cause. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it is. If you're totally honest with yourself, just look at North American snakes. Is there any morph colubrid that is prettier than a black and white Cal King? I don't think so. Just a completely normal 50-50 banded black and white Cal King you could find across the road in the right places is probably one of the world's most beautiful animals. It is stunning, and no morph will ever eclipse that in that species. It's like a morph is just different. It's not necessarily better. Right. What's better than that? What corn snake morph is more beautiful than a nice Okitee corn snake? I have one pair of corn snakes.
That was my first snake. An Okitee.
For nothing. They are stunning. It's a freaking pumpkin orange and red and black snake. It's gorgeous. It doesn't need a morph. It doesn't need exactly. Like that is...
Here's one I found at work this spring.
I don't want to see, I hate it when I see people lose an appreciation for that. That doesn't need improving. It doesn't need to be an albino. It doesn't need to be striped or whatever. It's like,
and finding it where it lives too was fantastic.
Like, I don't want to endlessly harp on why morphs are bad, but it's like the imbalance where people only focus on that, and the only thing they value, the only thing they appreciate is problematic. I just would like to see the hobby return to some sense of balance. If you look at my collection, there's a lot of wild type stuff, a lot of locality stuff. I've also got all these morphs. I'm not hybridizing any of them to make combinations, but you can enjoy both sides of things.
Absolutely. Yeah. Agreed. If there's somehow a way to balance the scale, that would be a good thing.
Yeah, probably pull a Terminator move where you go back and use the time displacement equipment to go back in time to 1984 and prevent Peter Call from asking $25,000 for the first piebald ball pythons. That's the jumping off point when everybody thought, oh my God, morphs are worth $1 million and this is how I'm going to get rich off only having 3 cents. That was the moment that it really went. Weird albinos and things were already expensive, but that was the point. It just went into the stratosphere, and people got in their head that this was some sort of a get-rich-quick Ponzi scheme.
Right.
It really fueled that. Was that when he did that? And it's brought a lot of people into the hobby, but it has also come at a great price. It's not been all upside in that regard. So yeah, lots of new morph stuff in the new book. I wrote the morph section in the first edition, and I've just basically, Justin and I have divided up who writes what sections. We're just doing the same as we did the last time. I'm rewriting my stuff, he's rewriting his stuff. We both go over everything he writes, I'll go over 5 times, and he will go over everything I write 5 times. And eventually, that's why when you read it, it doesn't read like 2 different people wrote it, because we both had our say a bunch of times, and you end up with a seamless transition between authors. Assembling the morph section was me, and it is this time as well. And I think the morph section is going to be over 100 pages long.
Wow.
Look, it's literally, there are so many morph combinations and things that didn't exist 8 years ago. New base morphs that have proven out. Hell, I've even proved out a couple. I mean, it's
Right.
that have proved out in the years since, a million more combinations. And I thought it was important because looking back at it, it's mostly just a gallery of pictures of things, really. So the new edition will have a much deeper dive into what morphs are, how morphs work, why do they do the things they do. Knowing that they're broken genes is one thing. Explaining how those genes are broken and how those breaks cause these things. So there'll be a much more scientific dive into what the causes and results of these sorts of various types of mutations. A robust discussion of inheritance and how these things are inherited. There is a very robust discussion on paradox animals and how that happens at a developmental level, what causes that. Deeper dives into the science. I think it's important to challenge readers. I think if you read a book and you can just read it cover to cover and you didn't have to go back and read something twice, you probably didn't learn anything. It's so the goal is always to make it difficult, but you can, if you pay close attention, and maybe you have to reread a few sections, but you can get your brain around it and to challenge people to learn something they didn't already know. There's no point in making a book that's just a bunch of pictures and, you know, and look at the pretty snakes and all this. It's like, I want to have some substance. And so there'll be a lot more of that.
Awesome. Talking about how morphs have brought a lot of new people into the hobby. And, you know, obviously, you know, compared to somebody like me who's absolutely relatively new and definitely not calling you old at all, but you have been in the hobby longer than I have.
I am old, man.
Point being, though, that gives you an incredible amount of perspective, and you've seen it change over the years. I was wondering, how do you feel about the way that social media has impacted the hobby? Maybe the pros and cons, and your thoughts on that? Because for me, coming in now as somebody that got his first snake when Instagram was already a thing, you know, social media is very clearly.
I'm so old, I can't figure out why Instagram is a thing. Like, what is the point of Instagram? Like, oh, I can post pictures and comments on the internet. It's like, don't we already have multiple ways to do that? Or isn't it just another redundant? It's like Facebook, but I want to say even less. Like, I want to have even less communication. It doesn't even. Why does this exist? Why does Twitter exist?
That is.
I would like to say a small number of incomplete sentences, and like, who cares? Like, I gotta. Real truths about life and interesting things cannot be condensed into that small of a format. It's like life is nuanced and complicated and messy and gray. It's not. It's like communication for short attention spans or something.
Agreed, and I have no answer to that question. I don't know why they exist.
I go back to my Terminator reference, but if we could just go back in time and kill Mark Zuckerberg before he steals the idea for Facebook from the Winklevoss twins, the world would be a better place. I think most people
Tom
probably
and
agree
MySpace?
that social media has honestly, it just makes people assholes. Like it's people are so unbelievably comfortable hiding behind the anonymity of their monitor to just say the most outlandish, outrageous, rude things they would never say to another person in person. It's like, I don't know. It's not, I don't think it's a good thing on balance. It's not going away. I will have to just deal with it, but it has changed more than just the hobby. It has changed society, and not for the better. Now we have rampant narcissism and people posting pictures of just banal minutia from their daily lives that no one cares about. It's like, no one cares what you ate for breakfast, dude. Why are you posting that picture? Literally nobody cares. It's very much, social media is all too often, and for the most part, a very asymmetrical form of communication. It's a bunch of people posting pictures and just talking about themselves. It's like, oh, look at what I have. Look at my animal. Look at me. Everybody wants to be me. Don't you wish you were me? Look at what I'm doing. Look at me. It's like And then everybody else is like, oh, well, me. It's like there's not a lot of exchange of ideas. It's just a bunch of like one-way statements. Look at what I'm doing. Look at this thing I have. You know, and
absolutely agreed. I think that it's a very toxic thing. But when people use it in a way, the rare few that do use it in a way to disseminate information and ideas, such as yourself, such as people maybe like Keith McPeak, you know, can you see it being positive in any way?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, anything in life, it is what you make of it. It's just that most people make it a shit show, frankly. It's like, oh my God, it's just, you have this amazing tool for disseminating information and linking people together, and it's just mostly used for garbage. But it's the devil, you know. It's the thing you have to deal with. It is how people communicate by and large these days. And that's not, and no amount of Nick's old man ranting about it is going to change that. So got to just adjust. But the biggest problems with it is that it's very transient. Like in the old days, when you'd have like a forum or whatnot, that information just stayed out there forever, and you could search that. And it created a sort of archive of information that you could access even years later. Social media is so transient that you post something, there's a discussion, 2 days later it's gone, and good luck finding it. It's not really there anymore. So it isn't a repository for knowledge or information unless you happen to be there at the time people are talking about something.
That's a good point. And then you have a whole bunch of people asking the same questions over and over again. The people that have been there a while getting irritated and mean because they keep hearing the same thing over and over.
There was also this, and I realize you're, obviously younger than me and at a different stage in the hobby than I'm at.
Only a tad.
It is calling me old again. See, I see how it is.
It's all right. Hey, we all know that you could kick my ass.
Old man, I'll be 48 in a couple weeks. Jeez.
Your golden years are ahead of you, Nick.
Oh man, I think my back is 148. Feels like it. Like you go up the stairs of my house, and you kind of hear some weird grinding noise. Like, oh, that's my body. That's my body making that noise. That can't be good. Your body shouldn't make grinding noises when you go upstairs, shouldn't it?
Hey, I already had an MRI on my back at the age of 19, so I feel you a little bit.
Just wait. Old age, it's coming for everybody. Nobody gets out of here alive.
That's right.
Social media, it is what it is. I don't know. It lacks a lot of substance a lot of the time. There are people who try, but it just doesn't hang around. It doesn't have the staying power. You also have this thing, and I know you've noticed this, where there's this sort of social media paradox where if someone poses whatever the question is on whatever Facebook page, the person that answers the question first will have the least amount of knowledge imaginable, and the person that is best positioned to answer the question correctly doesn't answer the question at all. Right. Because with reptiles, it's like someone has a question about whatever. The guy who's the internet expert who's just hatched his first clutch and knows every damn thing, that guy's Johnny on the spot, answering everybody's questions based on his 1 year's experience. And then you've got the older guys, like, I guess me, and I'm too busy dealing with, 1,000 snakes to answer, frankly, stupid questions. And I define a stupid question as, if you could have just Googled it and answered your own question in 5 minutes, I'm not going to take any time out of my day to answer a question you could have just Googled. Sure. And people there's this expectation that the world owes everybody an explanation for everything. It's like, you didn't even try. I can see if something, so I will literally only answer questions if it's a good question. Like if it's some stupid thing you could have done 5 minutes of research and answered yourself, why am I going to answer this? But sometimes someone will ask a deep question on something that's a little more nuanced or difficult, and I'll chime in. But I can't. It's like I said, if you could just Google it, why am I answering this?
Absolutely, and that's a really good point.
Oh my God, it is amazing to me. Like I get every single day, and I mean every day, twice today, I will get an email, a text message, a Facebook message, that other type of Facebook message that goes to your business page, and that third type of Facebook message that comes from people that aren't Facebook friends with you, and it goes to your message request that I can never find half the time. Like, I will get at least a message a day, sometimes more than one, and they just ask me a question. Hey, do you have any Bredl's pythons available? And I just feel like saying, no, I don't. Like, because you clearly didn't even try to look. If you made even the slightest attempt at trying to answer that question for yourself, you'd see, oh, I've got like 200.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, if you're not even willing to do, type out a few words in your keyboard, I don't even want to answer your question. I don't want to sell you a snake. Like, it's.
Yeah. You have one of the easiest to navigate websites as well. It's if you want to know if Nick has a snake, you can go right now and it's very clear.
I update it every day, like literally every day. I've already updated it today.
Which is dangerous for people like me. So I end up buying a lot of your snakes.
Every day I get hey, is this still available? Yes, it is, because it's still there. Like, I pull it down right when I sell something. I put new stuff up. I may have things that aren't on there because I just haven't gotten around to it. But it's nobody has an up-to-date website, so no one believes a website could be up-to-date. Like, it's just like what? This is current and updated all the time? Like,
not to mention years of lineage information, which sometimes I just look at for fun to see pictures of snakes from the 90s.
That reminds me, I got to get the 2020 stuff up there. I've got it. It's all done, but I got to get it. Page built, and my
another labor of
guy
love
is actually my father, who's like semi-retired and computer programmer, and so he does it for me, and because that's beyond my technical ability. But I'm kind of on my dad's schedule as far as that goes. I'm not in a strong position to demand that he put it up right away. It's like, hey, I'll send you those files over, you get those up. It's but yeah, got to get those up.
All right.
There's only 37 clutches from this year, so 37 carpet clutches.
Awesome.
Like, is there 45 clutches in total?
Before we jump into rapid fire, is there one or two that you're most excited about hatching
this year?
From this season?
Oh, from 2020? Yes, but I can't tell you one of the most exciting one I can't tell you about.
Okay.
So
must be pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty good. So I can't. There's a time and
congratulations.
Place. Hey, look at this. Now's not that time.
Congratulations.
Yeah, there was one small clutch that was pretty important. I just finally got the last of the little buggers eating, so I'm pretty happy about that, because that was a task unto itself.
Butters?
What?
Little butters, did you say?
Buggers.
Buggers, okay.
Little wee little things that don't want to eat rodents very well. So I finally got all the last one feeding, so that was good. No, I mean, there's some more stuff that I was pretty happy to finally, but it's almost like just a relief to finally made. And that is that I made hypomelanistic coastals I made hypomelanistic tiger coastals that are 100% heteroxanthic.
Very cool.
A lot of bad clutches on the road. Like, I had a couple clutches last year that went to crap and nothing hatched. And then I had a clutch this year. My last clutch, the fourth clutch, the first three, no babies hatched. And the fourth clutch, the last one this year, the female didn't have a pre-lay shed. I went to check on her to see if she was in a pre-lay shed. She laid a clutch of eggs, scattered them all over the tub. And
ouch.
Yeah, days earlier, they've been rolling around. So literally, I only ended up hatching 9 out of 23. But I did get 6 hypohead but then 2 of them are paradoxes, so I don't know what to do with them. What do you do with that kind of stuff? It's like another head xanthic, and they're mostly hypo, but there's blotches of normal pigmentation on them. So you can't really rule out the possibility that they will breed as a genetic normal that's just head xanthic and not as a hypo. And Murphy's Law being what it is, if I sell them as hypos, they will breed as normals, and if I sell them as normals, they will definitely breed as hypos. So and I don't want to keep them, so I don't even know what to do with them. It's one of those unexpected problems when you breed when you produce 400 pythons a year, 500 a year, or whatever it is. And is that you end up with this sort of rogues gallery every year of, what am I going to do with this? I don't know what to do with it. Frankly, you'll get the odd like birth defect, pink tail, minor cosmetic blemishes that are, the snake is healthy and fine, but you can't really sell it either, but you don't want to keep it. So what do you do with it? It just hangs around for 3 years till you give it to somebody. Like I always have a little small number of, I don't know what to do with this snake, animals.
Gotcha.
So,
yeah, that's a conundrum right there. Murphy's Law.
It is.
All right, let's do some rapid fire.
All
right. I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and let's try to answer them as quickly as we can.
All right, game on.
All right. Is there a lesser kept species that you forecast will gain heavily in popularity in the near future?
With pythons?
Any snakes.
Well, I'm apparently not very good at answering questions quickly. Yes, there's a bunch of them, but because what's happening is we're losing these things. They're becoming rare, and as soon as they're hard to get, then everybody decides they want them. Good example is Dumeral's bows. Remember when they were $50 a piece and you couldn't give the damn things away 10 years ago? Now they're $500 a piece. You're scrambling to get them.
Right.
Or Mexican black king snakes 2 years ago, also like $300 because people could breed them. You're seeing that with a lot of things, which is good for guys like me who've always bred things like olive pythons and water pythons and macklot pythons. Macklot pythons are like $700 a pair now. Remember when they were like $30 a piece wholesale and you couldn't give them away?
Wow. People
only appreciate things when they can't get them. They want what they can't have. But as soon as it becomes hard to get, then they decide they want it. When it's commonly available, they don't want it.
A lot of people trying to get Sanzinia right now, too, I've been noticing.
Yeah, they've never been common. They've always been kind of a rarity. Yeah, I kind of always wanted to work with them, and I probably should have got some a long time ago, and I never did. And now it's like,
We had one at the vivarium, and I was a fool. I let it sit there for 4 months and didn't pick it up. But anyway.
Right, moving on.
Bad Lucas. All right. You are a student not only of herpetoculture, but also of prehistoric creatures and geologic history. If you could visit any location during any time period in Earth's history, where and when would you go, and what would you be trying to find?
I've got a bit of a fascination with kind of late Pleistocene megafauna, so I probably wouldn't go back that far. 12,000 years, North America, all kinds of good stuff. I collect like megafauna fossils from the Pleistocene. I've got mammoth teeth and all this kind of extinct North American elephant bones and stuff. And I think it'd be, I think those animals are almost more fascinating than the dinosaurs and that kind of stuff, because dinosaurs are kind of remote. They're removed. It's so long ago, it's hard to relate. Whereas this stuff, our ancestors hunted and ate these things and are frankly the reason why they're not around.
Right.
But it's like you came around the corner and you just missed them. Like they were so recent. Woolly mammoths had become fully extinct about 3,000 years ago. The pyramids were 1,500 years old already when the last mammoth died out in the Channel Islands and in Wrangel Island in Siberia. So that's just endlessly fascinating. All right, next question.
Yeah, and do you have a favorite fossil in your collection?
I have a woolly mammoth tooth that's not even fully fossilized. It's a subfossil.
Shit.
And it's where it came from. It came from the North Sea, dredged up in a fishing net, because the North Sea, all of the North Sea was, and between Scandinavia and the British Isles was doggerland. It was all exposed continental shelf. When sea levels 400 feet lower, it was all mammoth steppe, mammoth grazing land, human settlements, people hunting mammoths out of the submerged land. Now it's really shallow sea bottom. It's great cod fishing. And fishing nets are forever scraping the bottom and pulling up mammoth tusks and bones and stuff from the Ice Age. So I've got a woolly mammoth, a perfectly preserved woolly mammoth tooth that's not even fully fossilized, dredged up off the North Sea.
That is really cool.
That is super cool.
Damn. Yeah, I want one of those. All right. If you could only keep one species for the rest of your life, what would that be?
Reynolds pythons.
Me too. Good one. Okay. So you have bred some very tough to breed species. Have you ever tried anything with the Boelen's python, and do you plan to in the future? Why not?
No and no. For one, they've become absurdly expensive, and I'm just not willing to pay that much for it. They're not that special to me. Like I don't find them particularly enigmatic. It's just not that interesting to me. Also, I cannot give them, I know what they need to be successfully maintained and bred, and I know that I would have a difficult time providing that. And so there's no point in getting some rare thing that's just going to sit around and do nothing. Their temperature requirements are such that to be successful in the long term with them, they cannot be in my snake ring.
Gotcha.
And there's nowhere in my house to put them. The only way I would have to construct a separate structure or an addition on my house or my snake building just for that one species to give them what they need. And that's not realistic at this point. So I just can't give them the thing they need most. So why bother?
Totally. Makes sense. Favorite non-reptile animal?
Non-reptile animal?
Non-reptile.
Living or extinct? Like
for you, either one.
Boy, that's thylacine, perhaps? Like that's
okay.
A cool one.
Nice. Do you think they're still running around out there somewhere?
I mean, the sort of slightly romantic side of me would like to believe that, but probably not. If nothing else, we're very good at intentionally wiping a species out of existence.
Yeah.
There's a spot in Kakadu National Park at Advia Rock where if you look up, there's this rock overhang and you look up and there's a painting of a thylacine. Wow. The thylacines have been extinct on the mainland for like 30,000 years in mainland Australia. So there's literally a painting of one. It's like it's that recent, and so I hope to see one someday and we clone them.
That would be badass.
That science is some good use. I want to see a freaking mammoth.
Yeah, I swear I saw a headline like 5 years ago that someone in Japan was going to have one in a couple of years, but I guess that didn't happen.
Give it time. There's a few ways to go about it. None of them are easy. The problem with like proboscideans is that they sort of have culture. They teach their offspring all sorts of things. And if you cloned a mammoth, you could probably get an Asian elephant, its closest relative, to gestate the fetus. But there's no more mammoths alive to teach that baby mammoth how to be a mammoth. And so you have that problem. It's like how does it learn to be a mammoth? It needs to be taught, but they're extinct. So I don't think they should not do it for that reason. I think, figure it out.
Yeah, good point.
I want to see a mammoth.
Absolutely. All right, so we know that you are the guy for carpet pythons and Bredl's pythons. What are some of the other less discussed species that you work with that maybe most people don't even know you have?
Oh, geez. I have both species of Aspidaites. I've got eastern blackheads, western blackheads. I've got womas. I've got every species of Antaresia. I have every species of Liasis except Baronide because nobody has Baronide. I literally have Savus, all three water python populations, olive pythons, albino olive pythons. I've got Maclots and I've got ducks. I have, Halmahera pythons, Tannenbar pythons, Lamina locality scrub pythons, southern scrub pythons. I have a lot, rough scale pythons, Angolan pythons. I do have some ball pythons. I got African rock pythons, Burmese pythons. Got a pair of Bali Island locality retics. I have a lot of stuff. I've got a couple species of short-tail python that I don't like. I really don't like them. Every day I got to work with them. I'm like, why do I have you? Why do you hate me so much?
Right. Very cool.
I have a lot of other species.
Gotcha. And then the secret ones too.
Not as many secrets as people probably think, but
I'm just joking. All right. Funniest customer interaction, trade offer story, anything weird pop up?
It's not a super fast answer, but try to make it as short as possible. I get a shocking number of people that want to back out of payment plans and want a refund of their non-refundable payments. And they always give me the same exact excuse. And that excuse is incredibly specific. And the excuse is as follows: that the transmission in their Jeep went out. Ergo, they cannot finish paying and they need the money back. It's never a transmission in their truck. It's never another problem in a Jeep. It is always a transmission and a Jeep.
Wow.
It is literally almost as if people are just Googling best excuse to get out of paying someone and saying, tell them your Jeep's transmission went out. I have had no less than 5 people tell me the exact same thing. It's crazy. Wow. The last guy who gave me the Jeep transmission excuse, I just started laughing. Like, I was just like, I honestly thought he was kind of fucking with me, because I thought, oh, clearly I must have told him the Jeep transmission story and he's just messing with me. But no, he was serious. And then he doubled down. And then he went to the second excuse, most common excuse, which is the phantom health crisis with a family member that they just hope you don't ask for any details on. So he went,
you have 2 excuses. If you go from one to the other, then...
He went from the number 1 to the number 2 because he needed the Jeep with a bad transmission to drive the family member to their appointment. I was just like...
Perfect.
Yeah,
Perfect. Oh man, yeah. About those inlands, I've got this Jeep, Nick. No, just kidding.
Yeah, I don't want to seem like I'm not compassionate about anything, but I don't care about your Jeep transmission. Don't talk to me about Jeep transmissions. Just
okay, all right. What is the worst snake bite you've ever received, and was it the bread lie that's sitting right next to me?
No, it was a freaking spotted python, a male spotted python that was only about this long, just a little guy eating hoppers. But he shot out, I was feeding, and he shot out in a rage like they tend to do, looking for food, and he bit me in the nose, but not just on the nose, he got the septum in my nose, like that little soft bit in the middle. He literally latched onto that. It was like a 1 in a million shot.
Wow.
And I just immediately dropped to a knee, eyes teared up. It was like, whoa, like that's not a place that a snake should be biting vigorously. So even though it was like the most wimpy snake you've ever seen, he just got this miraculous shot.
It was a proton torpedo right into the Death Star.
And have you ever been by an antaresia? They don't let go. They just hang on and twist and just keep. It was like seemed like forever. It stuck to my nose. Like,
man, the force was with that one. He disengaged his targeting computer.
Oh, he's a jerk. Actually, a couple of the worst bites I've had were spotted pythons. It's like they can't, because they're just so tenacious about it.
Interesting.
Yeah, nothing big or flashy.
All right, I got 2 more for you.
Okay.
All right, what is the worst reptile investment you've ever made?
Well, it's one that's still ongoing, so I don't really want to talk down my own project, but geez. It's like without getting into numbers, but there have been a few where it's just like, you got to be kidding me. Like, I have a 1.2 group of adult albino olive pythons, and they are 10 years old this year, and neither female has ever laid an egg ever. Ever. Nothing. I produced 0 albinos in 7 years of trying. This will be year 8. Every year, both females build big follicles. The male breeds them exactly 1 time. Nothing happens. They reabsorb. Every year, I think I got it. Oh, this is the year, and they start out, and then they reabsorb. It's absolutely maddening. I can produce head albinos by breeding to one of my other, like a 17-year-old normal female I've got. But
interesting.
Those albino girls do not want to ovulate for me. It's absolutely maddening, because buying a trio of like subadult albino olive pythons a decade ago, you can only imagine was fairly expensive.
Yeah. I guess that goes to that. Not just because you have a male and a female, they might not necessarily be compatible or something, huh?
No, he does not want to do it. At least he'll breed other females, but doesn't want to breed with them very.
Interesting. Okay, last one.
I will win that. I will win out eventually.
That'll be one of the most satisfying clutches.
It was a long time. I got olives last like 20 years, breeding at 20 years old. So.
Someday.
Probably be from the hets that I held back that are almost ready to breed. I'll probably breed my own hets I made, and that's where I'm going.
All right. So we did talk about Star Wars for a little bit over an hour last time. I feel like I firmly have a grasp. of your opinions on Star Wars. That being said, can you rank all 9 films in order of best to worst for me right now?
Only the saga films?
Sorry, we'll throw in Rogue One and Solo. So 11 films if you're willing to take it on.
I will. Number 1, I mean, we going from like worst to best or best to worst?
Up to you. Either way.
The worst is the Phantom Menace.
Okay.
Yeah, 15 minutes of awesome and a whole lot of
Annie.
That's not one of the better bits. That's not it at all. Like some good themes and things, but just kind of a bit too cartoonish and everything. Second from the bottom, Attack of the Clones. About 30 good minutes. Twice as much good stuff. Not a great movie. But you got about a solid half hour. Third from the bottom, I would actually have to put probably Return of the Jedi. Honestly, I hate to say that, but if you're being objective about it, I mean, you got teddy bears fighting the Empire. It's not, and George Lucas, like as much as people want to like, he clearly had, people like want to jump on the Disney era for not having a plan. It's like, as if George Lucas did. Watch that original trilogy. He was making up as went along. Oh, first Leia's Luke's love interest. Oh, now you're his sister. Oh, gross. And then, like, he ran out of ideas by the third movie. It's, they'll just build another Death Star. I got no ideas. Like saying, you know, ran out of ideas. Like, and in all 6 of the George Lucas movies, you get like somebody loses a hand, and there's a lightsaber fight on a catwalk over a bottomless abyss. Like in every movie, it's like the same trope. So he wasn't, you know, creative genius necessarily in terms of plot development. Then you get into better stuff. And I'd probably have to put The Force Awakens in the 4th in the bottom spot. It's actually a fun, enjoyable movie to watch, but it is a complete retread of A New Hope. It is the exact same plot. In which case, so it felt like Star Wars, and that was good, but it was so unoriginal in its plot that I had to rank it fairly low. The Last Jedi would come in for the same reason. It's like that people hated that movie, a lot of them. I think it's about half awesome and half terrible.
Right.
The things that people complain about The Last Jedi are, what they did to Luke. And Luke's character arc was so terrible. It's like, they don't realize, like, it's exactly the same thing they did to Yoda in The Empire Strikes Back that you all loved. What happened to Yoda? Oh, he failed. The Jedi Order fell. Everything went to shit, and he felt terrible about it, and he went into exile on some planet to die. It's exactly what happens to Luke, only it's some travesty what they did to Luke, but it's exactly what happens in The Empire Strikes Back, which is everybody's favorite movie. It's the same thing. It just, a lot of the Canto Bight stuff didn't hit with me, and it just seemed like a waste of time. So then you start getting into better movies. Revenge of the Sith. Pretty solid, especially once Anakin's eyes turn red and he commits to being evil. It's
my
pretty
personal
solid,
favorite.
Right? That last half hour, some of the best Star Wars you're ever going to get. Pretty epic. But as a whole, it's darker. It has an awesome downer ending. Loved it. Loved it. The Rise of Skywalker is a pretty solid movie, honestly. Does it have problems? Yes. It is not perfect. They clearly didn't know what they're doing. Whatever plan they had, they abandoned and kept changing, and it just ends up kind of a mess. But it's a pretty fun ride. If you just take won't need this for 2 hours, and just let it roll, it's a pretty fun ride. It's almost the only criticism really is it goes too fast and has too much stuff in it. Should have been an hour longer. It's just too intense and too much action. Empire Strikes Back, second from the top. It's like synonymous with my childhood. It was truly visionary when you saw that in the theater in 1980, like I did as a child. You're just like, holy shit, I've never seen anything like this before. When the Hoth scenes, it's like, nobody made a movie like that before. It was something truly unique and groundbreaking, and it was awesome. And number 1 is Rogue One. And I don't care what anybody says. It's the best Star Wars movie that they've ever made. And if anybody disagrees, they can fight me. The acting is the best you've ever seen. The visual effects are on par with the best of any of them. It has kind of a downer ending, but it's also kind of uplifting. It hit on every note at every level. It's like they made a Star Wars. They put the war in Star Wars. It made their first movie, A New Hope, seem like it had more stakes because you saw what came immediately before it. and so it was more, it had more weight. So
Absolutely.
fantastic.
I don't know about you, but the final hallway Vader scene at the end of Rogue One was the most satisfying moment I've ever experienced in a theater.
Yeah, because it's just total carnage.
Yeah, and you were waiting for it the whole time.
In particular, it's the second he grabs that guy with the Force and sticks him in the ceiling. You're just like, whoa! And then he just kind of casually just slides. It's like, that is the most dark, awesome. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That was big.
We finally get to see a man in the Vader suit doing what Hayden Christensen showed that Anakin could do, rather than just being a clunky, like, oh.
So awesome. It's so great. And then that end when the Tantive 4 breaks away and he's just standing there on like the little dock area, just looking super dark and evil. It's like, yes.
And that really makes that brings a whole new meaning to when Princess Leia is saying, I'm on a diplomatic mission. They're like, the hell you are. I just saw you fly away.
Oh, yeah. Because it implies, like, it looks like the next movie takes place 15 minutes later. Like, they just caught up to him. Like, it's just a few minutes later.
Exactly.
So, it's so good. So good.
Oh, man. Absolutely. I like your list. I'm with you there. Yeah, we forgot Solo.
Oh, that one is kind of a true standalone thing, and that it's not really tied to anything else. I personally loved it. Like, I thought it was a fun, enjoyable thing. It's like, you know what? Not the fate of the entire galaxy isn't always at stake. It's a smaller, self-contained story, and that was awesome. I thought after about 5 minutes, you forget that Alden Ehrenreich wasn't Harrison Ford, and you just go with it, and he's pretty good. I loved it. There's always some, I thought it was the space train ride, the train robbery in space. Like, it's such a total space Western. It's awesome. It reminded me of watching Firefly, which if you've never watched the series Firefly, you need to do that immediately after this is over.
Yeah, I think Solo suffered from just coming right after The Last Jedi. I think if it didn't have that backlash, it would have been well received.
It's because Star Wars fans are the most butthurt bunch of fans ever. It's just, it's true. It's like nobody, and I mean nobody, hates Star Wars more than Star Wars fans.
Absolutely.
Most of these guys bitching and complaining, they're really not Star Wars fans. What they are is they're fans of The Empire Strikes Back, because they hate everything else. They hate Return of the Jedi. They hate the prequel trilogy. They hate everything Disney's done. They always leave Rogue One off their list because they don't want to admit that movie's awesome, so they just never mention that it exists because it's awesome. But they're like, they just like one movie. It's like, and I like that movie too, but it's not perfect. It's got all kinds of plot holes in it and stuff.
Agreed.
Like, you just go with it. It's like, quit taking it too seriously. It's space wizards. Quit knocking my space wizard movie. It's like, just go with it. It's fantasy. It doesn't,
Yeah.
Those are fine.
Well, Nick, I think I speak on behalf of everybody that likes snakes that we're extremely excited for the second edition of the book. I can't thank you enough for joining me today, talking a bit. Yeah. Hope you had a good time.
Indeed. Anytime.
Right. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just signing off.
All right. Yeah. Anybody watching this that wants to check out what Nick has for sale, what's going on with him, is it inlandreptile.com straight up?
Yep.
Inlandreptile.com, Facebook at Inland Reptile. Anything else you want people to know?
No, that's it. I'm the easiest guy in the world to find.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.